Diamonds in the Shadow by Carolyn B. Cooney is a story of refugees. The last thing Jared Finch wants is to share his room with an African refugee. When his church can't find an inexpensive apartment for the 4-person African refugee family, Jared's family decides to step in over his loud protests. But taking them in means a lot more than providing shelter. Jared's 11-year-old sister Mopsy is thrilled. She thinks she will now have the sister she has always dreamed of. But when the Amabo family arrives, it's clear that they have more problems than the Finch family can handle. Celestine and Andre are pleasant enough adults and speak English very well, but Andre's hands were cut off in Africa. Finding him a job will be impossible until new synthetic hands have been developed and attached. Celestine has a new job cleaning at the motel, but she refuses to learn how to drive. Matu, the teenage son, brings 2 mysterious boxes of his grandfather's ashes. Alake, the daughter, doesn't react, eat, or talk to anyone or anything, and her hair is a wild mess. Weirdest of all, Celestine and Andre don't seem to talk to or care about the 2 teens. Is this a real family? No one in the Finch family noticed the 5th refugee who stepped off the plane. He was sent off to Texas, but is desperately trying to find the Amabo family. They have something he wants. Find out what that is in Diamonds in the Shadow by Carolyn B. Cooney.
They say dragons don't exist. I know better. They thought fire breathers were a thing of the past. I've proven them wrong. And now they want to own me. They believe we shouldn't be together. But without him, I'll fade to nothing. If he discovers my secret, it could be dangerous for us all. But I'd risk everything to be with him.
Marked as special at an early age, Jacinda knows her every move is watched, but she longs for the freedom to make her own choices. When she breaks the most sacred tenet of her kind, she nearly pays with her life, only to be spared by a beautiful stranger sent to hunt those like her. For Jacinda is a Drakai, a descendant of the dragons whose ability to shift into human form is her best defense. Forced to flee into the mortal world, Jacinda struggles to adapt. The one bright light is Will, gorgeous, elusive Will, who stirs her inner Drakai to life. Although she is irresistibly drawn to him, Jacinda knows Will's dark secret. He and his family are hunters. She should avoid him at all costs, but her inner Drakai is slowly slipping away. If it dies, she will be left a human forever. She'll do anything to prevent that, even if it means getting closer to her most dangerous enemy. Firelight by Sophie Jordan. Teenage Refugees from China Speak Out by Colleen Shi. This book gives you a brief description of China and its history and culture. Then it details interviews with teenagers who are now living in the U.S. It describes their struggles and adjustments trying to fit into the United States. This book gives you insight into the lives of those that are refugees in the United States. If you enjoy nonfiction true stories, you would really enjoy this book. Think outside the box and pick up a non-traditional book and enjoy.
My new book, A Long Walk to Water, is based on the true story of a family friend named Salva Dut. Salva was born and raised in southern Sudan, and at the age of 11, he was separated from his family by war. There's also a second story of a girl named Naya who lives in Sudan today. I set part of the story in 1985, and part of it in 2008, to give American readers some idea of what's been happening in Sudan over the last generation, which I think far too few of us know about. I was inspired to write A Long Walk to Water by Salva Dut and learning about his life's work today, which is with an organization that drills water wells in southern Sudan for villages where there has never been a supply of clean water. Learning about him and his life is enough to make you want to say, well, how can I help?
Linda Sue is a wonderful lady. When I met her husband, and her husband invited me to come to the party in the house. Well, it was about a few weeks to go to Sudan. That was my first time I met her, and when I walk in, she was natural. She started asking me a lot of questions right away. And she was really interesting with my life, what is going on, where I came from and what I'm doing and all this kind of stuff. And she asked me, Salva, have you have any memoir about your life? I said, yes, I have it. And I said, I will give it to you.
In a lot of ways for this book, I felt kind of like the typist, that it was really, Salva's story and Naya's story, and that they were being told to me and I was just typing them. So that was a new experience for me in writing, and I really enjoyed it. I think it's important for readers to learn about Salva in A Long Walk to Water because he is such a role model for them in this way. Salva came to the United States with nothing. He had been separated from his family when he was 11 years old and then lived under terrible conditions in refugee camps for years. Yet now he's doing this incredible thing that's changing the lives of thousands of people. And I want young people to think, if he can do something like that, I can do something to make my little corner of the world a better place to live.
Good Night, Mammon by Norma Fox Mazer. Karen's whole world has been turned upside down by World War II. Just a short while ago, she was looking forward to her birthday. She lived in Paris with her parents, her 12-year-old brother, and her grandmother. Then the German soldiers had come to Paris and arrested all the Jews. Karen's father was arrested and her grandmother died of a heart attack. Karen and her brother and mother were hiding in the attic, afraid to be found out. When the owner of the house tells them that they must leave, they have no choice but to start walking. They walk during the night and try to find shelter during the day. They are headed south and hope to find safety in Italy. When Mammon falls ill, she tells Karen and Mark to go on without her. Can Karen and Mark leave their mother? Can two children find their way to Italy and the promise of safety? Read Goodnight Mammon by Norma Fox Mazer, a refugee story set during World War II. This author came to our school last year. Many of you didn't get a chance to read any of his books. This one's a great one called Bystander by James Preller. Eric is the new kid in his Long Island town. When he meets Griffin and his posse before school begins, he can tell that they are a little different. Over the next few weeks, he learns that Griffin is the sort of kid who makes an awful enemy. Charming and scheming, he is what the teachers call an adult pleaser, but a kid teaser. He is one of those kids with a natural magnetic personality, one he uses to control the kids around him. But he always puts on a different face for the adults in his life, such as teachers and parents, and convinces them that he is a sweet, mild-mannered child with good attitude. Very quickly, Eric realizes that something isn't right about Griffin, but he doesn't do much about it as a bystander. Why? Griffin always seems to be in the middle of bad things. And if Griffin doesn't like you, you'd better watch your back. There might be a target on it. But when Griffin goes too far, Eric begins to notice exactly what he is doing to his so-called friends. What's a kid to do when his conscience kicks in, but his brain tells him that he'll be the next victim if he does anything? For many Americans, no matter their age, the Vietnam War has receded into the distant memory or even to the realm of myth. But what happened to the southern Vietnamese people who were left behind when the Americans withdrew to cut their own losses? Cynthia Kahota explores this devastating question in A Million Shades of Grey. 13-year-old Yatin has one passion: elephants. Yatin is an expert elephant trainer, the youngest handler in his village. He is not so enthusiastic about school, though. He would rather spend his energies training his beloved elephant lady, with whom he has a close, intuitive relationship, without the violence and mistrust that characterizes some of the handlers' treatment of their animals. But history might have its own plans for Yatin. His Dega tribe has long had a relationship with the American troops fighting the northern Vietnamese. Many men, like Yatin's own father, have assisted the American Special Forces in exchange for a promise that the Americans will always defend the Dega if the northern Vietnamese break their treaty agreement and attack these mountain-dwelling South Vietnamese people. In the wake of the American withdrawal, however, the U.S. troops seem to have forgotten about their promise to the Dega. And when the northern Vietnamese attack Yatin's home, nearly half of the villagers are killed. And many others, including Yatin, are captured, forced to perform manual labor, including digging mass graves, at penalty of death. What will happen to Yatin? Find out in A Million Shades of Grey by Cynthia Kahota.
The kids in Daniel's new town have a secret. They each have a power, a superpower. But Daniel's gift is most unique of all. He's powerless. Or is he? From author Matthew Cody comes a tale of super kids. Powerless. You don't need superpowers to be a hero.
"10,000 Days of Thunder" by Philip Caputo. Philip Caputo has produced what is at once an overview and a sensitive, resonant picture of the war as seen and experienced by American soldiers, the Viet Cong, North Japanese guerrillas, and the citizens of both South Vietnam and the United States. Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Philip Caputo writes about our country's most controversial war, the Vietnam War, covering the period from the rise of Bolshevism in Russia in the early 20th century to the American normalization of relations with Vietnam in 1995. It is an ideal source for both information and understanding. It was the war that lasted 10,000 days, the war that inspired scores of songs, the war that sparked dozens of riots. From the first stirrings of unrest in Vietnam under the French colonial rule to American intervention, to the battle at Hamburger Hill, to the Tet Offensive, to the fall of Saigon, 10,000 Days of Thunder explores the war that changed the lives of a generation of Americans and that still reverberates with us today. Pick up 10,000 Days of Thunder by Philip Caputo.
Have you ever seen a face hidden in the bark of a tree and known that the man trapped inside wanted to hurt you? Read The Crossroads, a spine-tingling ghost story from award-winning thriller author Chris Krabenstein. The Crossroads. You never know who you might bump into there.
The Dead Boys by Royce Buckingham, a book about moving and a bit of zombie action. When Teddy Matthews moves to Richland, Washington, With his mother, his main concern is making new friends. He finds that he meets and makes friends with a number of boys rather quickly, but no sooner has he met them than they disappear. Teddy is nervous by the dilapidated house across the road from his new home, and in particular, a really odd sycamore tree is making him really nervous in the garden of the house across the street. While everything left unattended in Richland seems to be dried out by the desert that surrounds it, the tree is healthy and green and moves of its own accord. As Teddy investigates his new hometown, he learns of the shady history of the town's nuclear power plant, where his mother now works, and was the reason for their relocation to the town in the desert. Built by the federal government after the Second World War, it was accused of releasing toxic substances into the atmosphere, creating health problems for the people and the land around Richland. Following the leak, a number of 12-year-old boys went missing at 10-year intervals. Now that Teddy has arrived in Richland, another decade is up. Will he be the next victim to disappear in this strange, shifting town? Find out in The Dead Boys by Royce Buckingham.
I've always loved football, but I think the initial idea for Pop was my grandmother had Alzheimer's disease at the end of her life, and one of the things that she did, our family noticed, was that she would tend to mix up generations, so she would see the son-in-law as the brother-in-law she remembers, and she would always call my mother her sister, and, I started thinking about, what if, very much like a what-if guy as a writer, what if an Alzheimer's patient started to mix up generations and got into a relationship with a kid who this person saw as a contemporary. And, I sort of kicked the idea around. It didn't get anywhere in my head until I started reading in the media about the very serious issue of, brain trauma acquired in sports like boxing and football and heavy contact sports, leading to conditions like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. And then it all started kind of coming together for me. I never was a big football fan growing up, I think probably because I grew up in Canada, and hockey was sort of supreme, a way of life up there. So it wasn't really until I came to the United States for college that I became a big football fan, particularly the NFL, and it really has supplanted everything as my passion sports-wise. I mean, I love football. I did a book series that was kind of co-published by the NFL a few years back. That was just so much fun. I mean, to work with the NFL and go to their offices, and they promised me Super Bowl tickets. So that was just a blast. And obviously in the case of Pop, you're talking about a story that is delving into sort of, in a way, the dark side of this sport we all love. But I hope that never at any point do we lose touch with the fact that this is the game we love.
Thank you so much. You're a great audience, and I hope I spurred your interest in a few books. See you in the Library Learning Commons.